Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at unity, but maybe not in the way you're used to thinking about it, not as a simple feel-good moral aspiration, but as a crucial and really a hard-nosed survival strategy. We are diving into a stack of really compelling research from the HAL Institute, that's the Human and AI Learning Institute, and they've performed an incredible synthesis. They've fused modern psychological insights with the core tenets of, well, global spiritual traditions to define the very essence of human unity. So our mission here is to answer one central overriding question that comes out of these sources. Is unity just a nice idea we hope for, or is it in fact humanity's essential, non-negotiable mechanism for collective survival?
It is the ultimate high-stakes question, really. These sources, they effectively place humanity at this massive crossroads. You've got, on one side, scientific psychology and evolutionary biology, which tell us that both unity cooperation and disunity aggression are natural human tendencies, both of them forged deep in our evolutionary past. But then on the other side, you have the wisdom that's been distilled from the great spiritual traditions, and the research here specifically draws on the Bahá'í writings, which make a much bigger sort of ontological claim.
Which is?
That unity is our inherent true essence. The disunity is merely a distortion, an acquired behavior, not part of our original design.
And the power of this research, I think, is in how it reconciles those two seemingly competing ideas.
Yeah.
They conclude that unity isn't just nice, it is humanity's true protective shield, an existential necessity.
Right.
And conversely, disunity gets relegated to a primitive, maladaptive relic. It's an obsolete survival tactic. Okay, so let's unpack this. Maybe starting with how psychology supports unity as a survival imperative right now.
From a purely psychological standpoint, the findings argue that unity is the very bedrock of human resilience. If you think about cooperation, empathy, social bonding, these traits aren't secondary. They're primary foundational survival tools.
So they're not just soft skills.
Not at all. For an individual, unity protects by ensuring you have access to pooled resources, shared knowledge, and, maybe most importantly, trust. This social capital is the fastest defense against any external threat, whether that's a natural catastrophe or economic upheaval.
That makes so much intuitive sense on a community level. I mean, if your neighbor is working with you, you're less likely to starve. But if unity is so critical to our nature, we have to address the elephant in the room.
Disunity.
Disunity. Aggression, conflict, prejudice, they're also deeply ingrained, and they feel like they offer protection too. So my first question reading these sources was, if unity is the core essence, why is disunity so effortless for human groups?
That's a crucial question, and the HAL research addresses it head-on. They do it by making a very important definitional distinction. They classify disunity not as protection, but as aggression.
Okay.
It's fundamentally a fear-driven, reactive mechanism. Historically, yes, conflict and exclusion sometimes served the short-term survival of small groups defending highly scarce local resources against a physical rival. It was, tribal defensiveness. But here's the nuance the sources really emphasize. Those acts were rooted in aggression and exclusion. Not true. Constructive resilience. That short-term fear-based aggression is fundamentally different from the long-term proactive defense we see in robust, unified social structures.
So we have two different types of defense. One based on fear and exclusion, which is aggression.
Right.
And one based on cooperation and trust, which is unity.
Exactly. And the modern psychological conclusion is, well, unequivocal. Today, unity is the superior, more durable defense. We have mountains of data now showing the tangible benefits. Just think about individual health. Strong social support networks significantly reduce chronic stress, they speed up recovery from trauma, and generally improve longevity. Disunity, meaning constant social friction, systemic inequality, prejudice, it actively works against that biological need for connection. In our modern, complex, interconnected global world, disunity just becomes a net negative that actively undermines our collective survival.
It's a strategy with a shelf life that expired centuries ago.
That's a great way to put it.
Which is a perfect segue into the evolutionary timeline. If aggression was once functional, when did that mechanism break down at scale? Let's trace this shift from tribal defensiveness to, well, global interconnectedness.
We were to zoom way back to early human history. When resources were truly zero-sum, say, a small hunting band competing for one watering hole aggression toward the outsider, that early form of disunity, was a quick adaptation. It helped that small tribe survive that immediate threat.
Right, but then as population density grew and complexity increased, the equation flipped. And this is where it gets really interesting.
Precisely. The sources trace the exponential rise of civilizational power back to the moment societies learned to scale cooperation beyond kinship lines. Larger cooperative groups didn't just survive, they thrived and fundamentally outcompeted smaller, fragmented ones.
And you can see the massive advantages unity enabled.
Oh, absolutely. Unity allowed for the specialization of labor, moving beyond just subsistence farming. It enabled large-scale trade, which mitigated local resource failures. It fostered the development of sophisticated culture, philosophy, and accelerated innovation. All these defining features of civilization, from irrigation systems to written law, they're all products of scaled unity.
So suddenly, disunity wasn't just about losing a fight.
No, it was about preventing global progress and flourishing.
So the evolutionary imperative shifted from defend your small patch aggressively to cooperate widely to create abundance.
Absolutely. And this brings us right to the crux of the modern argument. In our globalized society, defined by instantaneous information flow, deeply intertwined supply chains, shared ecological threats like climate change, disunity is explicitly labeled as maladaptive.
I really appreciate that term maladaptive because it sort of removes the moral hand-wringing. It just treats it like a biological failure, a strategy that no longer aligns with the environment.
Exactly. And when aggression or prejudice is applied globally, the scale of failure is catastrophic. The sources stress that systemic prejudice, interstate division, war today, these do not serve survival. They actively threaten the entire species.
So unity is no longer just one option on the table.
It is the only viable strategy for collective survival in the 21st century. The quick, localized, fear-based adaptation of tribal aggression, it fails catastrophically when applied to challenges that require global coordination, like, say, pandemic response or sustainable energy transition.
So if the scientific analysis concludes that unity is increasingly necessary for our survival, let's pivot to the second pillar of this research, the spiritual perspective, which argues that unity isn't just necessary, but it's fundamentally innate.
This is the section the sources call spiritual anthropology, and it really provides the philosophical foundation for the whole synthesis. Drawing heavily from the Bahá'í writings, the core tenet is that unity is the absolute essence of human nature.
The essence.
The essence. These teachings affirm that humanity is not just a collection of competing tribes, but a single family, created inherently noble and luminous. And this redefines everything about conflict. In this framework, disunity, so conflict, prejudice, ignorance, it's not a natural state we must simply tolerate. It's defined as distortion, an acquired veil, or, as the sources cite directly, a sickness of the soul.
A sickness of the soul.
It implies that conflict is fundamentally an aberration, a temporary condition, not the intended pattern of our existence.
That's a profound difference. If unity is the core hardware, then why do we experience so much conflict? That suggests a kind of duality in our operating system.
That's where the concept of our dual nature comes into play. The spiritual view recognizes that humans possess both a higher nature and a lower nature.
Okay.
The higher nature encompasses love, justice, compassion, the drive towards selfless contribution. The lower nature is the self-centered primal core fear, ego, and aggression.
I see.
Unity is achieved when civilization successfully cultivates and reflects that higher nature. Disunity is the result of letting the lower nature take the lead, often driven by intense, localized fear and the instinct for selfish accumulation.
And when we use this powerful spiritual language, unity is portrayed not just as some abstract ideal, but as light, as health, and I think most vividly as the protective shield of civilization. It gives this moral concept the tangible weight of physical defense.
Exactly. It makes the pursuit of unity an active protective measure, not just a passive hope.
So we arrive at the pivotal moment of the HAL research, synthesizing these two powerful narratives. Science says unity is increasingly necessary for global survival. Revelation says unity is our true essence. How do they formally reconcile these two, very different claims?
They define unity as ontological, while disunity is defined as contingent.
Okay, we need to unpack those academic terms quickly for us and for you listening. What does it mean that unity is ontological?
Ontological means relating to the nature of being or existence. So to say unity is ontological means it is the fundamental, true reality of what it means to be human. It's the underlying structure.
Like the factory default.
Exactly. It's the core hardware of the human operating system. It's the permanent architecture.
And if unity is the permanent hardware, what does it mean that disunity is contingent?
Contingent means accidental, dependent on specific circumstances, or temporary. Disunity, therefore, is not a permanent feature of our design. It's a deviation.
A software glitch.
To continue the analogy, yes, it's like a serious but fixable software glitch, or a deep corruption that has been acquired through historical circumstance, ignorance, and fear. The underlying system, the hardware, is still unified, but the execution is corrupted. And this reconciliation is so practically liberating because it changes how we approach conflict. The sources argue that we have to understand the pathology of disunity, but only in order to actively transcend it.
Okay.
They use this powerful analogy. Studying disunity is like studying a specific disease, not to adopt the sickness, but to strengthen the body's immune system, to inoculate against it.
Yeah.
That shifts the entire focus from just managing conflict to building immunity. Which brings us to the next, inevitable phase of human development. If unity is the essential protective shield, then the whole species needs a kind of global software upgrade.
Right.
The sources make a strong claim that humanity is now rapidly evolving toward a stage where disunity serves absolutely no positive purpose whatsoever. It becomes pure existential liability. That's the imperative. Because the risks of continued fragmentation are so profound, nuclear risks, climate collapse, and so on, disunity has to be consciously and systematically discarded.
So what's the task then?
The task for psychology, for education, for spirituality must be unified to actively inoculate the global population against the contingent state of disunity.
And how do we do that?
This is achieved by systematically cultivating empathy, fostering true justice, and crucially, building a deeply shared, overarching global identity that successfully supersedes any localized or tribal identity.
This moves the discussion from high philosophy into policy and education. It's no longer optional curriculum. It's civilization survival training.
It have to be.
So what does this all mean for us, for the individual trying to navigate this massive, accelerating evolutionary transition?
It means we have to recognize the choice we face every day. The sources conclude that unity is far more than a noble ideal. It is the absolute existential requirement for our collective survival. Disunity is now identified as a dangerous, persistent relic of fear-based adaptation that must be consciously dismantled.
So the protective shield of civilization is not something external we acquire.
It's something internal we cultivate.
The choice between disunity and unity literally determines the continued viability of civilization. We have to discard mechanisms that are now proven to be primitive and, frankly, self-destructive in a global context. So here's the final provocative thought for you, the listener, to maybe mull over and explore in your own life based on the findings of this HL research. If unity is the required inoculation for the next phase of human evolution, what concrete, measurable steps in our daily lives, our media consumption, our political engagement, or simply our responses to perceived conflict reflect the conscious cultivation of that higher nature, meaning love and justice, over the lower contingent nature of fear and ego? You have to examine your own wiring for those ancient maladaptive glitches.